Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're looking after yourselves. We're back with another episode of Game On. As you can see, my background has changed. I have found time in my busy schedule to make some of our backgrounds, especially when we're doing online recording, sort of fit more of what we're sort of talking about. So as you can see, I've got my gaming background behind me. If we ever do, I know you mentioned about doing live streaming stuff. So if we do go into more sort of like using our Twitch account and sort of streaming stuff through there, you might see me with this a bit more often. But yes, I digress. We're back with another episode of Game On with another amazing guest speaker, and we're going to be diving into the world of gaming, but also talking about the importance of diversity and representation as well. But as always, as I like to say, I don't want to introduce the guest speakers because I will never do them justice and never, show how passionate they are about their subject and essentially how cool they are as well. So instead, I'm going to hand over to our guest speaker today. Andy, could you please let us know a bit more about you?
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Andy and I go by the gamer tag Blackamora. I am a co-founder and the MD of Streamcast, which is a Black British Black British brand we performed, and we cover gaming in all sorts of forms, including podcasts, live streams, hence the name, blog posts, videos, events, and anything in between. Essentially, Streamcast was created as an answer to provide some positive Black representation in gaming because I wasn't seeing it, and neither were my friends. And we know that Black people in Britain make up a lot of gamers. Everyone can relate to having an older sibling or an older family member. Maybe you got a secondhand console from them, or Tekken was in the house and you got your friends around and you all play to find out who the best was. We tried to capture that vibe and just modernize it. So in that case, we're trying to tell our stories, but now we've expanded and we're trying to tell many other people's stories as well, because gaming is for everyone.
Thank you. And I think it's really sort of like passionate from what you were saying that I sort of connected to was, you talking about the sort of like representation of Black people within, media in general, but, with gaming as well is something that, isn't always seen in the best light. We've spoken in our previous episode with Melanin Gamers about this. And interestingly enough, it wasn't a podcast, but I was listening to, we like to sort of share some special mentions of individuals and organizations, but sometimes linked to our episodes. And I guess one would be Dan Allen Gaming. He's I don't know if he'd count himself as a YouTuber or say he's like an interviewer or whatever, but he interviews like different people within gaming. So I know he interviewed I've forgotten the person's name, but he interviewed the person who plays the like main villain in Deathloop.
Dope.
Yeah. So he interviewed both of them. So he interviewed Cole and I guess like
Juliana.
And Juliana. So he interviewed like both of the voice actors separately, and they were sort of saying the same thing of like what was really cool about the game was not only the fact that like you are having you're like the lead character is Black. It's not like it's like, oh, he's a reformed gangster. No, it's like an interesting story. It's like really like with twists and turns. Like to me personally, I love that game. If you haven't played it, definitely would recommend it. And then it was interesting because the person who voiced Juliana, she was saying that you don't really see like, especially you saying like someone with not only like a Black person, but a Black person with that type of hairstyle, sort of looking that way, being confident in themselves. Yes, Juliana has a very troubled past in the game, but I think she was saying like it's nice to sort of see that sort of like representation and sort of to see someone who, was a really good villain, I guess is the best way to describe it. But yeah, I guess they shout out to them. And yeah, I definitely will sort of include a link to that those interviews as well. But it was really good. It was really good. And it's a really good conversation. So I definitely recommend if anyone's interested to check it out. But yeah, we sort of got into the first question. So I'll ask it anyways. If there's anything else you wanted to add to it, we can. If not, we can go on to the next one. But it was essentially sort of like what you mentioned. You are a part of Streamcast, and you guys do amazing work, as you sort of already hinted at. And it was just basically to ask you what it is and why, what inspired you, to essentially create it.
Sure. Yeah. I know I did cover it a little bit, and I didn't want to do that too much because I knew the order. But yes, the Streamcast is a collective of people who all have the same goal. We want to create a safe space for all gamers. And what inspired me to come up with Streamcast is it was really a lack of positive Black representation in the gaming scene. As I said earlier, I know so many Black people play games. Like, and it's not just a pastime. It's not something that they do sporadically. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but these are hardcore gamers, and that has a negative taboo, but it shouldn't by itself. So I wanted to make sure that Black gamers who game regularly had a safe space, had a platform. Um, the only Black representation I could see were from people who were kind of making fun of themselves, making fun of their skin color and their family members. So I didn't want that to be what people who have never met a Black person in real life to think of us. So yeah, with that, I wanted to make sure that it was a positive and intelligent space that we could have debates, we could talk about our favorite games, we could nerd out, and not have to worry about anything. I realize that gaming has been stigmatized for a little while, but we wanted to make sure that gaming could be something that you could feel safe talking about to someone, or even if we're like the gateway for you to pick up a new game. That's what we want to achieve. So that was a very long way to answer your question of inspiration. The inspiration was I was not seeing positive Black representation in gaming, and I wanted to kickstart that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's the most important thing. Especially like you said, like with gaming, it's there's like a community that can come with it. And again, we sort of, like mentioned in our last episode, sort of, even though there's a lot of like positives within gaming, there can also be a lot of negativity, and that it can get quite toxic. But I think it's also, like we said, like creating these spaces of whether you are a Black gamer within the UK, or a Black gamer in general, or whether you're sort of someone who you're not Black but you're sort of interested in gaming and you want to learn more and things like that. I think having those spaces where like you said, conversations can happen, people can sort of like learn more, dive into sort of like these different topics, these different themes. They can sort of hear from individuals who essentially are like them. They're people who are passionate about gaming. Because I feel like sometimes, like we said, with gaming, not only like just do with there's like a wide variety of like Black gamers within the UK. I think also as well, sometimes you feel like, oh, you can't really talk. Sometimes people might feel like they can't talk about gaming because it's not their full-time job. They don't work in the gaming industry. They're not sort of like game journalists. They don't, research games or, do things like that. So they sort of feel like, oh, well, if I start a conversation about why, I don't know, I really dislike Fortnite, then they're sort of like going to get judged because people be like, well, actually, I've got all these facts and things like that. But yeah, it's about having like those spaces where I know that like conversation can happen, and it's not like a forced or stressed thing that you're sort of like putting someone in an uncomfortable position, but actually you're just like, well, no, like if you want to learn more, come along. Like whether it's like you said, like listening to podcasts, whether it's joining Discord channels or following Black gamers on Twitch. Yeah, it's just sort of like diving into those communities and sort of getting involved and learning new things. But yeah, we're going to go to the next question, which it's a bit of a tough one. It's a bit of a tough one. I won't lie. Because the next question is, Andy, what's your favorite game?
It's my favorite and least favorite question. And I always make sure to ask every guest that we get on. My favorite game is the 2018 God of War. And I think why I love it so much, there are many reasons, but having played the original 3 or 4 games on the PS2 over to the PS3, I kind of got a feel for who Kratos was as a person, what he stood for, and that Greek saga kind of finished, and we went on to this Norse era of his life where he's a lot older, he's a lot slower, and he's got a new child. So he's now having to deal with being a father while fighting these massive beasts. So I think, to sum it up, it's for me the perfect way to blend in storyline and gameplay. The gameplay assists how the story is being told. So I was trying not to spoil anything, but at the start, there is no cohesion or chemistry between father and son, and that is relayed in the fact that he can't, Atreus can't really use his full abilities, and Kratos barks at his son. And then as you play more throughout the game, you realize that these two actually do love each other. They just have never had that conversation. They've never been able to express how they feel towards each other. And through these obstacles and these difficulties that they have to overcome, they now have an understanding. They grow some organic chemistry, and all of a sudden the gameplay is a lot easier because now Atreus is more in line with what Kratos wants in terms of a I guess a traveling partner and the son. And it's reflected in the dialogue because he starts off just calling him boy and not using his name that he gave him. And then at the end of the game, he's actually using his given name, which just tells you how far the two have come in terms of their growth. It's a game that has the player grow alongside the characters on the screen. And I think that's a unique experience. And that's why I think it's my favorite game.
No, I definitely agree. And I feel like, especially, it's just, I think, sort of even looking like forward to how the, Ragnarok went, which came out last year.
Mhm.
Like even in that game, it's kind of like what you said, like you see how even though sort of like you said, the game's been out for some time, but without spoiling it, even in that game, sort of like going to sort of develop their relationship because, like you said, like by the end of the first game, they're sort of like, we love each other. We're gonna try and be the best that we can be to each other, and sort of like not allow difficulties and sort of things to get in the way of our relationship. But then you sort of still see that where those like old tendencies come, and I think it's nice because in a video, like I guess like life, sometimes without knowing it, people can sort of fall back into how they used to sort of treat someone, and it's not necessarily to say because they're a bad person. It's because they're sort of like worried about themselves and what they're going on. So like with in that game, Kratos knew that, I guess mini spoiler, but like Kratos knew he was supposed to die by the end of the 2018 game. And he was just like, okay, I need to prepare Atreus. I need to be harsh on him because, he's going to eventually get to a point where I'm no longer going to be there to protect him. And he's sort of just like, I need to do that. But I'm also pushing him away, which made him feel like, oh, our relationship's going back. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think especially like a recent sort of game, both games even, like it's a change not only in like gameplay but also the storytelling and the character that I guess sometimes can be missed in newer games, and sort of it's like what you said, it's either okay, the storyline's great but then the gameplay sucks, or the gameplay is rubber, or the gameplay is great but then the storyline isn't great, and it's just like, no, this game is just like, no, we're going to deliver like a really true heartfelt story that from start to finish gets you feeling emotions about the characters and connected to the characters, and you can relate to either being Atreus and you're sort of the son trying to appease the father, or it gets you relating to Kratos being the father who's trying to protect his son from the harsh realities of the world. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's only fair if I answer this question.
Of course.
And yeah, I mean, like for me, it's I don't like. Well, I want to say I don't like this question. It's just a tough question because there's a lot of games that I like. I think for this one though, I would probably have to say, because I've said like previously, I've said like Mass Effect. I've said I think I said Dragon Age. I said I've generally forgot the game. Splinter Cell, like the original Splinter Cells, and how they did stealth and stuff. But for this episode, I'm going to say Spider-Man 2018. I'm going to keep it the same and go with a Sony game. I think the reason why I picked that is I think for that game they really understood one key thing that I feel like sometimes films and TV shows sometimes miss on, especially if it's like iconic characters like Spider-Man, is they sometimes feel like, okay, if we're going to introduce a new character, it's not going to be like like a multi-dimensional thing like Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which I guess is, to plug another Spider-Man game, is a really great game. But yeah, I think with that, it was just like they genuinely didn't feel like, oh yeah, we need to sort of like, we've got to show how he got his powers and explain like Uncle Ben and all of this. Sort of like with the MCU Spider-Man, like they were just like, cool, we're just literally gonna give you a Spider-Man. But then what I liked even more was it wasn't like a Spider-Man who, he'd only been fighting crime for maybe like a couple months. He hasn't really met most of his villains and stuff like this. They were just like, no, we're gonna give you a Spider-Man who's been Spider-Man for 8 years. He's like knows he's already got like a wide variety of villains. He's already established in New York as Spider-Man, and we're just gonna sort of dump you in the deep end, and you're gonna learn the game as you go along. And I feel like for me, I really liked it because it was like, okay, cool. We're not gonna like waste time and explain like, he's whether it's his relationship with people, so like with Mary Jane sort of being in there and being like, will they, won't they, for like the whole film, whole game. Like, I just really like they were just like, no, we're gonna sort of like put you in a Spider-Man, and he's already sort of going through different things and stuff that's happened before that you don't know, but you're still gonna enjoy the experience. And I feel like for me as well, the thing that I sort of came out of that game enjoying the most was when Dr. Octopus is so Otto Octavius is introducing the game, because obviously in the marketing he's not mentioned at all, so no one knew he was going to be there. People knew that Norman Osborn was going to be in the game, so everyone was just like, okay, cool, they're going to do like a Sinister Six thing, but Norman Osborn's going to be like the Green Goblin. That's going to be the big twist. And then I remember like just playing the like first, I think it's within like maybe the first 2 hours, maybe the first 3 hours, you get a voicemail from him, but it doesn't say who he is. You're just like, oh, okay, it's Peter's boss. It's probably like some new character they created. And then when you see him, you're just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, is Dr. Ock is coming to the game. And then what's interesting is, I think even for me, when I saw him, I was just like, oh, okay, cool. They're going to, tease that he's going to be a villain in like a future game. But then, because they've been like heavily promoting like Mr. Negative as the main bad guy, I was like, okay, cool. Mr. Negative is going to be the main focus. And then it was just like, no, halfway through the game, he becomes Dr. Octavius, Dr. Ock. He's like doing all these things. And yeah, I just feel like they did a really good job. Start to finish, I feel like it was a really good game. The swinging, like the gameplay, the sort of web swinging is amazing. And I think, yeah, one last point to sort of end it on is I think I really liked how even like Spider-Man Miles Morales basically did its own thing with its storytelling, but sort of like it was sort of like the whole point of the Miles Morales game, even though it was quite short, was to be like, Miles is Spider-Man, but he doesn't have to be like Peter's Spider-Man. And I like that, whether that's through the gameplay, whether that's through, as he sort of learns these new powers, he sort of realizes that I don't need to fight people like Peter does, or I don't need to do things like Peter does. I'm my own Spider-Man. I can do this. Yeah, I think that's why I really liked both games. So I'd put them both as like probably one of my favorite games, because yeah, the gameplay for both is really good. They don't even like, it's not like in some gaming companies do where it's like a carbon copy of, okay, you're playing as Miles now, but it's basically like Peter. They sort of really make it a really good, they really make both experiences really good. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend, if you haven't played either game, definitely play both. The second Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which is what's officially called, is supposed to be coming out in theory this year. They've started marketing it. There hasn't been any gameplay or stuff, so you never know. But to be honest, even when Miles Morales came out, I was surprised when they sort of did a trailer for that. I was just like, I don't know, working on a Miles Morales game. I guess it's coming out later this year. So yeah, you never know. It could be come summer. There's gameplay, there's all of this stuff. It could, I don't know, Sony like to do out of the blue state of plays where they sort of announce their gaming stuff. So you never know. I could be saying this, and then within, I don't know, 3 days, they're just like, yeah, we're going to do a state of play and we're going to show off Spider-Man. So yeah, I keep an eye out is the best thing to say. But yeah, I definitely recommend before it comes out, play both games. They're really good. Got a lot of good DLC for the main Spider-Man game, and Spider-Man Miles Morales has a really good storyline. It's got a heartfelt storyline. So yeah, definitely check it out. But yeah, we're gonna go on to the next question, Andy, which is essentially, why is positive Black representation within gaming? So whether this is through the characters that sort of we get to play as, whether this is through the teams that are able to develop games, whether it's through even simply just the actors that get to sort of, whether it's doing the vocal stuff, whether it's doing the actual motion capture, why is it important to have positive Black representation?
That is a very good question. I think positive Black representation is important in all industries, in all sectors, all fields, because there is an effect that you have when a young child, is on watching TV or movies, at the movies or playing a game, and they see someone that looks like them, that has their skin tone, that has hair that looks like theirs. Subconsciously gives them belief that they could be them. There's a point of resonance there. There's a relatability point there. With a lot of people, of our generation, we didn't grow up with that. When you look at, I guess, TV cartoons, for example, superheroes made a big chunk of what was put out on TV. And you see Spider-Man, you see Peter Parker, you see Batman, you see Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash. And it's like, where are we? Where are we? I think Static Shock is one of the first positive solo Black superhero cartoons I've seen. I know you could say X-Men, but I would say that was headlined by Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. So it's very important. That is why, because of that, you now have us playing catch up now. And on our website, the streamcast.co.uk, we've put a few stats to explain why this representation is so important and why it's important that we must act now. So in games, I believe it's about 10% of game characters are Black, which it's an okay stat because it reflects the population of this, not even this country, but 10% is a good number. But then when you drill that number further, you find out that a lot of that 10% is made of sports stars and gangsters. So that's FIFA, that's NBA, that's NFL, GTA. So there aren't fictional stories told about us. There's no God of War, Tomb Raider. There's none of that centers around a Black person, which is one of the many reasons why Streamcast was formed. And we are seeing that change now with, as you said, Deathloop's Colt and Juliana. We've got Layla and Redfall coming out, and that is, a step in the right direction. Definitely, I feel like, if I'm being real, that's about 10 years too late, but it is positive steps. But again, I think this is all interlinked. The fact that we don't see a lot of Black content creators. I think in content creation, 90% are white, which is huge. There's a huge disparity. So there's definitely something there as well when it comes to the point of resonance, because we need to see more Black content creators, whether it's gaming in terms of journalism, whether it's playing the games, whether it's covering the games, interviewing voice actors, like you mentioned earlier. There are so many jobs and so many unique things that we can do to stand out and to make sure that we are getting a fair shake. And also, the teams that make the games, you said it in your question, that's very important, because that's the difference between making a token Black character in the game. And there's an example, I could put, Final Fantasy's Barrett in the remake of 7. I think that was a stereotype in every sense of the word. And then if you actually have people of Black heritage who care about how the character is going to come across, you get a more 3D character, right? So that's why it's important, because on those three levels that I stated, you've got the games. Say that again, because you've got the three areas. You've got the characters in the games that we're going to play as. That's the representation on the screen. You've got the people behind the scenes, the Black people in the games industry. They're going to make sure that Black people are represented as well as they should be on the games, and they're going to make sure that Black people covering the game get a fair look at. And then you have the people covering the game in content creation. Those are the people that are going to communicate the game from the screen, from the devs to the public. And that can work as one really smooth relationship. But that is why I feel the positive Black representation is so important in gaming.
Oh, definitely. It's exactly that. It's just about ensuring that every level, it's like we said, it's not a token thing. It's actually something that's impactful and sort of will stick with the whoever's playing it for however long. And I feel like as well, it's sort of like what you were saying about like growing up and sort of like the representation, I guess, across all media. It's like that's why people said that Black Panther as a film sort of stuck out because I think like when Black Panther came out, I was talking to my brother about it, and he was just like, for him growing up, the big like black superhero in a main movie was Blade, and he was just like, Wesley Snipes Blade was like really cool, like had this charisma, it was really great, like seeing him on screen. But then like he was saying, like it's funny because for like with me growing up, there wasn't really where a character there where they were sort of like the headliner, like you said, like leading whether it's the game or or even the marketing or even like the movie or the TV show. And he was just like, and I think that's why, for example, with Black Panther, it stuck out really well because it was having, a Black director, a predominantly Black cast, and especially main cast, like taking the front and doing things. And it's even like we are saying with gaming that, that's one of the reasons why Deathloop was as good as it was, is because like the interactions, for example, between Colt and Juliana, they're that funny because they weren't like the voice actors weren't sort of taught, you gotta like you can't like I mean I don't know, like they're not like, well I don't know them, so I don't know if they're sort of like joke around like that in person, but like those interactions that you can sort of see like, oh no, that's really funny, like the way that Colt even like talks to himself, like the way that he sort of describes things in the game, like that really makes the experience. And sometimes, like you said, that there are some times when games might maybe limit voice actors or sort of tell voice actors to sort of like they can't really sort of dive into these different things. But yeah, I definitely think it's important, and it's important to see sort of that involvement, that sort of like that positive representation, and sort of seeing it go from start to finish. And yeah, and I think like you said, it's great to see, like you said, in upcoming games, it's sort of like more that's happening. And I'm sure in sort of the years to come, there'll be more games like that. Maybe even some more like AAA games, because I think one thing before we go to the last question is I think kind of like what you're saying about gaming. I think even like for example like with Assassin's Creed, like I know some of the main like line assassins for that game were Black or were people who were sort of like Native American, like Connor from the third game, or you had Bayek from Origins. And it's just like me and my brother say that we love Origins and 3 for the way that the cultures in both games. Well, I mean, Assassin's Creed most of the time does it well, but they're sort of like showing off that culture, like not sort of like pandering it and doing like, this is like a, like this is the token, or like this is what like people usually see. Like no, it's actually like getting people to speak in their sort of like in the language of the time, or like people like even in like Assassin's Creed 3, Connor has a Native American name and he goes by that. But it's even like that, like they could have made him just not have that, and not really
Yeah.
talk a lot about his culture and things like that. But that's sort of heavily linked to his character. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, in years to come, where sort of gaming will do that, and sort of look into sort of like including sort of the cultural norms and things like that. There's one other thing that I want to say about this, which I think one other game, sorry, that I think, I mean, it doesn't like market itself as this. Obviously, it's not like one where you play as a sole character, but Crusader Kings 3. Now the reason why I say that is because so for anyone who doesn't know, that game you sort of play like different periods of history. You can either play as like a pre-made character. So I think the time periods are like 846 and then 1066. The whole idea is you're supposed to like you can essentially play as any sort of like leader as you want. So if you want to play as like a king of a whole country, so if, for example, in 1066 you wanted to play as the King of England, you can play as the King of England. If you want to play as like a count or a duke, or anything like that, you can. And I think the reason why I like that game a lot is because it's sort of like so you can play in any sort of, well, not any part of the world, but like any part of the world where the history sort of known, because the game sort of will follow history. Um, so it's really nice because it sort of like shows you the culture of different areas, I guess, like over 1,000 years ago. So it's really nice to see. It's really nice to see that sort of on the screen, and sort of see like a game where it sort of dives into, looking at how that gameplay, like how that culture was at that time, especially like, for example, in 1066. If you sort of if you look on TV or you look in like most documentaries and stuff, they won't necessarily talk about how, I don't know, what was going on in Africa or what was going on in Asia. But it's nice that you can sort of like play these characters, and then you can sort of like see how long, like how your dynasty essentially goes. So you can establish your kingdom, you can take over land, you can see like how, like, essentially, as long as you've got kids, the game will continue until, like, I think my brother said, like, there's like a set time period where it will end, but it will continue for as long as you want. And yeah, I've played it quite a bit. And yeah, I'd say it's a good game for anyone who's sort of like, if you're into history and you want to know more about like different cultures, religions. T-Pain is now involved in the marketing of that game. He jokes that he set up a religion. He set up a religion in that game because the game allows you to, like, for example, with that, you can set up your own culture. You can decide like what is okay, what is sort of like not allowed in your culture. If you have, like, so there's sort of like different points. So if you've got enough there's not, I've probably got a term, but essentially I think it's faith points. If you have enough faith points, you can basically convince everyone in the land that you sort of control to join, whether it's a different religion or you can create your own and sort of decide like whatever goes. So I think even like in the advert, like T-Pain did it, and then like his religion, you're allowed to do like some funny stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting game. And I think it's nice to sort of like, especially from a historical point of view, to learn about what was going on in different parts of the world at time periods when they're not always discussed. It's really good. So yeah, definitely would recommend. But yeah, we've now come to the last question. Again, you could argue this is one of the maybe not the most important question, but it's one of the most important ones. And essentially, Andy, it's, what is your favorite game moment? Now, for this, we've sort of, or last time we did this, we said that we'll take two. So one can be from either sort of like a game moment. So I know when you mentioned God of War 2018, it was funny because that was my moment for my single player experience.
Okay.
Of when Kratos says to how have I forgotten? Yeah, Baldur, where Kratos says to Baldur, we have to be better. We have to be better, and sort of what that means to the game and the future game is really relevant. But yeah, so you can I'd like, if possible, one from a single player game, so sort of a story moment that happened and it really stuck with you, but then also one from a multiplayer game. Now it could be something that you did. It could be like you had an amazing shot. You had an amazing time on a multiplayer game. Your team won just at the last second. But yeah, what are your favorite gameplay moments from a single player game and a multiplayer game?
What a question. You really asked some good ones. I think this one's actually harder than the favorite game question. I think, yeah, okay. There are a lot of moments that just live on with me. So I guess I will list some of them off and then go in a little bit more detail into the actual answer for single player. There have been so many games that have had really cool moments that I've just adored. And I think I like stuff that includes a lot of colors, a lot of big explosions, stuff like that. So I could go off on the same game that you mentioned, God of War 2018, finding out who Atreus is, massive moment for me because they drip fed you throughout the entire game. And if you picked up on it, you're like, okay, okay. I think I realized it midpoint with the world serpent. There was a couple lines of dialogue when I was like, okay, cool, cool. I respect it. I could even go back to God of War 3. I remember the first time I put that game in the PS3. I think it was my first PS3 game. And just killing Hades on a Sunday morning, it just felt really cathartic because that was a very nice cutscene. Hades had this really big red body, and his weapons had a purple glow to them. So all the colors were just doing all the right things. Um, I think I'll give an answer to a game that I've not mentioned at all in this episode to give you some sort of variety because I love God of War that much. I don't want to be that one note. So, favorite single player moment is actually in Pokemon Emerald. There is a cutscene, and I can't remember where in the Hoenn region, but you land, and throughout the entire game, you've had these two Pokemon war against each other, basically. You've got Kyogre of the sea, and you've got Groudon of land. And for whatever reason, these Pokemon are treated like deities and they hate each other. So they're fighting. And all of a sudden, you get this organ music. It's just church-like. And Rayquaza, this green dragon, just descends from the heavens, comes down, and basically yells at the two Pokemon. And as a child, I thought, oh, that's really cool. That's a really cool moment. As an adult revisiting that, I felt like Rayquaza was being disturbed from a nap, and it just told Groudon and Kyogre to knock it off, get back to sleep, or I'm gonna slap both of you. So I love that moment for two different reasons. When it comes to multiplayer games, again, many answers. Um, I'll go through a few. I'll go through a few. So in the lead up to finishing my A levels, um, I started a little bit of a study group with some friends, and we would study maths, we would study chemistry, etc. And then at the end of the day, everyone would come to my place and we'd play Tekken, and we'd just hang out. And I think one person just won it all the time, but it was that little bit of leisure to break up the the boringness of just studying and writing stuff over and over. Um, there is a FIFA moment with one of my best friends, actually the person I started Streamcast with. And I was getting back into football at that point, and he'd never really been into football, but we played FIFA because it was fun. And he hadn't played for a long time, so he thought that all the mechanics were the same, but it was not. So I remember him trying to slide tackle one of my characters, and he literally bounced off my character because he was so stocky. While he was running, it felt like Juggernaut in the X-Men. It was it was very funny. But I think I will say the actual answer for multiplayer will be as Streamcast, we held an online tournament in 2021 for Smash Ultimate. And the community that brought together was amazing. And there were a couple of moments where one guy got a triple kill, and there was a couple of fights between these two players, and it was legendary. It was I don't even know how to compare it. Like Federer and Nadal, in tennis, it was so tit for tat. They were on par with some semi-pros that I've seen. It was an amazing moment, and those are people that we're still close with to this day. And I think that's why it's my favorite multiplayer gaming moment. We kind of cultivated that.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, no, definitely, I agree. I've been waiting patiently for Pokemon Emeralds. I don't know when Pokemon Nintendo, if you're watching this, I've been waiting patiently to get it on the Switch. I don't know if you're gonna wait until the new Switch comes out, or if you're gonna be like, actually, you know what, we're gonna celebrate and just do it sometime soon. But yeah, I've been waiting because, like you said, Pokemon Emerald was probably one of the first Pokemon games that I properly played. And like when you were mentioning that moment, I was like, oh yeah, I completely remember that. I'm taken back, and I was just like, yes, I remember when it happened. And even like when you got to like go after the like legendary Pokemon at the end of the game, and you could like capture them, I was like, oof. Okay, and that like the fights were tough, but like it's like we said, like when you accomplish it, it's great. I'll answer these ones as well. It's only fair. I think for me, single player. I'm gonna throw in a mobile game moment because I think last time, like I said, last time was I mentioned Boulder, but I'll mention three. So first one is It's a single player game called Shadow Fight 2. It's a mobile game. Okay. If anyone's not played it, I definitely recommend. It's really good. So basically the way it works is you fight all these like mini bosses. Well, there's like different ways you can level up your character, but essentially your character was this great warrior. You basically got beaten up by these bad guys. They then basically like almost left him for dead, and now he's called Shadow because basically he's lost all that he was because he tried to open this gate to get power and instead let out all these bad guys who then beat him up, left him for dead, and then he's basically trying to get back at them, defeat all of them, and sort of put them back in this gate. For me, they're one of the first bosses is tough. He's tough for two reasons. So each level of the game, you gain something new. So at the first level, the other person they have like ninja stars. They have this move where they can turn invisible. You can't see them until you essentially like knock them down or you stun them. So it's the first, even for like a first fight, it's kind of tough unless you like in typical mobile game fashion, you pay to basically make it easier. But yeah, so I know for me, like when I was first fighting him, I was like, oh gosh, man, like, and it'd be those ones where you'd win. So you have to win 3 matches in a row. So you might win 2, and you're like, okay, I'm set. One more match, I can do it. And then this guy's will do the craziest things. But yeah, I think for me, the moment that I loved the most was the final boss is like super tough. He's like, even if so I know there was like a paid one which like gave you stuff for like free, or there were easier ways for you to like beat the game. But yeah, even in the paid one, like it's still super hard to win the game. And I remember like fighting the final boss, and I was like, okay, cool, like I was trying everything, and then it was just like I don't remember what happened. It was like everything just like lined up because I was just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna do this and this and this. And then like I remember defeating him and like finishing the game, and I was like, you know what? It took me a while, but I can now say I've beaten the game, and I feel like that to me was one of the nicest things ever. Because being able to say that I've because that game was tough, but being able to say that I defeated that game was amazing. I'd say my second one of a single player game would have to be the Mass Effect 2. It's nicknamed the Suicide Mission because essentially it's like all the odds are against you. You are essentially going to rescue your crew from like they were taken by aliens. You're going to rescue your crew. Now for me, it wasn't like it was tough because you have to make sure you pick the right people and do the right things, or otherwise your crew will die. But I feel like my brother had it worse because that was his first ever BioWare game that he played. But he didn't know for that mission you have to do like the loyalty missions, or even if there's like a timing. So I think the mission before, if you start that mission, so there's like basically it's like a lead on. So there's a mission you do before where you're sort of like separated from the rest of your crew, and then that's when your crew get kidnapped, and then you literally have to rush in and go in and rescue them. If you don't go in quick enough, essentially that means that your whole entire crew will basically die. So you have to basically know this so you can do. So he didn't know any of this. He went in thinking, these loyalty missions aren't important. Like there's just additional content. That I've queued the last mission. There's no need to rush it. So he was just like, well, his first playthrough was awful. Like I'm pretty sure he said like most of his crew didn't survive. He lost most of his support characters. And he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna have to play the game all over again. So I think for me, I just liked it because it is like the soundtrack is great, it's tense, but it's also really good at like pushing you to like, keep going. And yeah, I personally really like it for that. Yeah, it's a really good single player moment. I definitely recommend Mass Effect 2 to anyone. And then last moment, let me pick another game. Last moment. Oh gosh, man. It's now I'm just trying to think about the games that I've played. Last yeah, no, I'm generally gonna. I'll come back to it. I'm gonna have to think about it for a bit. But yeah, I guess multiplayer one. I think, like you said, one is definitely FIFA. Like, well, and I'll probably include one clip of it. But even like whether you're playing against someone, whether you're playing yourself, like when you score like an amazing goal, and you're just like you don't know how you did it. You were just like you're trying new things with whether you were like going to shoot and you're trying new things, or like you cross the ball in and you're just like, it could be offside, it might not be, and then it's not, and you're just like, oh, cool, great, I'm gonna go for goal, I'm gonna go for goal. I think for me that is like one of the best things ever. I think as well, I mentioned it before that I loved Titanfall 2 multiplayer. So being able to there were times when I was just in the zone and I was like taking out the enemy team out of nowhere, getting the top of the leaderboard for that match was the goal. And like there were like late night sessions of like long recordings of when I was basically just like I was going in. I was just like, cool. I got third this match. Next match, I'm gonna go higher. And he was just like, just putting in the work, grinding to get new skills and new abilities. Was really good. And then I think the last multiplayer moment, or last moment in a multiplayer game, I think for me it's probably the end of so for me, I played the Division single player, so all the sort of like stuff you could do with other people, I didn't really do it because I was like, I'm usually there for the story. So the Division like last mission is tough. And especially because like I took a long break between the first, when I was in the first Division game, I like played it for a bit, then I took a bit of a break, and then I got back into it. And I was just like, actually, you know what? This is pretty tough. And I was just like, okay, cool. I was like, I was already doing the side missions, but I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to have to do like more side missions. I might even need to redo missions. I'm going to have to like really focus on like upgrading my gear, thinking about like, what's the best way to do this? Think about like timeout. So if I use this equipment, how long is it until I use it again? And I think for me, it was just like almost like almost like a real thing. I'm like planning out how I'm going to, take out a group and do all of these things, defeat the main boss, like get to the end. So I think for me, it was literally just that. It was just like all that work to just, to paid off. It all sort of came together in the end. But I think, going back to the single player, I just also need to just look up to see from the games, because I've got like
maybe I'll play your gamer clouds.
Yeah. So we've got like all the games that we've like bought, and I'm just looking at those to see if there's one in particular. Oof. You know what? I probably will say one of my favorite moments in a video game was probably essentially. Oh man, it's generally bugging me because I'm generally just like, there's a lot to choose from. What I will say actually, no, one that did stick out was Watch Dogs 2. Watch Dogs 2 for me, even though Watch Dogs Legion, even though Watch Dogs Legion, sorry, is based in London, there were some issues with the game, so we won't go into that. But Watch Dogs 2, I really loved, mainly because like I think what me and my brother, we've never been to San Francisco, but it like really encapsulated the community. It was like a huge step up from the first Watch Dogs game. You could hack into more things, you could do more things. And then even like the soundtrack was better. It was a completely different game. And I think for me, I told my brother that we both really loved the game because of that and just how the game sort of like went and things like that. And it's just like fun. And it was just like really cool. but yeah, I can't believe I actually forgot about this. One final one that I'll say about it works for both single and multiplayer was probably like either you could say Battlefield. Actually, yeah, Battlefield Hardline. I'd say was one of my favorite games. As a single player campaign, like being able because it was interesting because you played like as a cop for like a short bit of the campaign, and then you're playing as a criminal. Well, your character got framed, then you have to play as like a criminal for the rest of the game. But it was interesting because like you had to think about, okay, am I going to go in guns blazing? Am I going to be stealthy? Am I gonna like in the game, like they were saying, if you're a police, or even when you weren't a police officer, you could like bring out like a weapon and just like tell someone to halt, and then they'd have to like stop. But the thing is, if you took too long to arrest them, then they would sort of like just come out guns blazing. Even like the multiplayer, like that to me, because obviously it's a bit of an exaggeration, but like when you did the multiplayer and like you can level buildings and like being in like it, to me it's so fun in any Battlefield game when you're in a building and that building starts to collapse and everyone's like running out. They're just, oh gosh, gotta get to the windows, and everyone's just like trying to run out of the building. I think for me that was one of my favorite things to do, is just like to see, even like I don't even care if I was the one that brought the building down. I was just like, yeah, man, I just want to be on one of these buildings when they collapse, because like the tense thing of like, oh, I'm inside, I gotta run. It was good, man. So I'd say that. And then one final thing. It's not a gaming moment per se, and I've never actually played this game. I only watched a YouTuber called Radbrad sort of play.
Oh yeah, shout out Radbrad.
Yeah, shout out Radbrad.
Honestly, how convenient.
Yeah. One day we'll have him on the podcast. One day, that's the dream.
Hey, let me know.
But one game he played, I've generally forgotten the name. But yeah, when we're sort of like editing the video, I'll put up the name of the game. I think it's like, I don't think it's I Am Something, but I don't remember. But it's an old game. It was on the 360. It's really interesting because in that game, it's like black and white. It's a guy who's like looking for his family. You don't really know like what happened when you start the game, but it's like a bit of a survival game. The thing that I really liked about that game is in that game, so your character, it's a single player game, not online, but you meet other survivors, and some of them obviously are like nice, some of them are a bit hostile. The interesting thing with that game though is your character is obviously allowed to have like a weapon. He can have a gun if he wants. But what's interesting is there's not a lot of ammo. So in the game, and I think that's what that's what a lot of people say that they liked about that game, was in that game, if your character goes up to a group of, I don't know, like enemies and sort of brings out like his pistol and it's just like, stay where you are, give me all your loot, or like, oh, I'm gonna take this loot and there's nothing you can do to stop me, then the other characters, they don't know if there's ammunition in there or not. So even if you did have ammo or you didn't, they would be like, oh gosh, like we're gonna stay back, we're not gonna do anything. But in the game, as soon as you try and like so you could bring out the weapon and do that, but then they might, if you're doing it for too long, they'll sort of like start maybe walking towards you. If you sort of were, if you were like walking around, like if you sort of like tried to fire it, so let's say you accidentally pressed the wrong button and then you sort of like pretended to, you went to like fire a gun and they heard the click, they'd be like, there's no ammo in here, get him, he's lying. And I feel like that's something that modern games don't do. And it's just like, no, actually, like in a survival setting, people probably would just like, even if the weapon had no ammo, like they wouldn't just like chuck it on the floor and be like, it's done. I'm going to wait and find a new one. They'd be like, no, I'm going to still keep it. And whether it's to, put off other survivors, or whether it's to sort of like, take control of a room or things like that. It would be different. But yeah, I feel like that to me, those are sort of my probably favorite moments in online and sort of like single player gaming.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I've learned a few things from you in this episode. Okay. Deathloop is a great game that I need to try out.
Definitely.
You like to blow up buildings. And you like really nice 3-dimensional games with the whole intimidation tactic with empty weapons potentially. I really like that. It brings some sort of almost improv and D&D based interactivity in gameplay. And yeah, maybe that is something that games are missing now, because they do have their set stories and they want you to follow the path, but Yeah, I think there's always room for a game that is very heavy on decision making. And hey, you don't have enough money to buy this thing, but can you convince the shopkeeper to let you have it for free?
Yeah. Yeah, man, definitely. And I think that's what like even in the like pandemic, that was one of the things that got me into like retro gaming because I played or what I'd seen like gameplay of the latest well it's not even that latest, coming up, it's literally 10 years this year, of Splinter Cell Blacklist. So I saw that game and I was like, everyone talks about Splinter Cell being like a really good game, and I was like, let me just let me buy the collection and let me start with the first game. And I was just like, I completely get why people love it and say that like stealth wise it was like something else, because like you have to be careful about like how you're walking as a character. If you walk too quickly, then people will hear you. Even the sound mechanics. So in the game, if you walk over glass if you walk over glass period, even if you're not walking really quickly and someone's nearby, they'll still hear the boots crunching on the glass. So they'll sort of still investigate. You have to be careful of like light as well. So and I think that's one of the things in the game. It could be really annoying because you could be like, technically most of my body's in a shadow, so I shouldn't be seen. And then you'd just be like trying to hide, and then out of nowhere, like someone be like, I see him over there, I see him, and you're just like, how do you see me? The meter's like almost saying that I'm completely in the dark, and they'd be like, no. But yeah, I feel like that, like those little things, I think that's sometimes one of the things that games, especially like AAA games, can miss, is it's just like smaller things that don't make things easy for the character. Like, and even if you're playing on like the easiest difficulty, or if you're playing on the hardest difficulty, like it shouldn't be like, oh yeah, because you're playing on easy, we're gonna just like you could people can just walk by, you can walk on glass, no one's gonna hear you, all of this stuff. No, it should still be a mechanic of the game, but just find a way to like make it, or do it in a way that it's not like it's not pressured, it's not always on you, so to speak.
Yeah. What I love about that is people can't complain about that because it's grounded in reality. People's eyes, they can do a lot of work. So if you are standing at an awkward angle that casts a shadow, of course people are going to pick up on that, especially in the environments that you are stealthily trying to invade. So.
Yeah, no, definitely, man, definitely. And I definitely recommend, for anyone who's interested in the world of stealth, like check out the Splinter Cell games. The first one, the second one, Chaos Theory, I'm sort of on at the moment, and that's like really good. But yeah, man, I definitely agree. It's like the realism in gaming is what sometimes can be missing, and it's just like, less like, it's great to be able to do all of these things, but let's bring games back with a bit of, and I'm not saying like every game needs to be realistic. Like I said, like there's some games that aren't, and I like them. Like I know a lot of people didn't like for Assassin's Creed Odyssey that it's sort of like went on a sort of more mystical route than traditional Assassin's Creed games. But I told my brother I really liked it because like it was cool to have all these cool abilities that I could do, and like I'm generally like fighting people in the game, and I'm just like, gosh, that's hard. You're fighting like Cyclopses, you're fighting like a version of like a Animus, that's what it's called, Animus version of Medusa, like all of these things, and I was just like, it's really cool. Even like randomly in Origins, like when there's like a mini crossover with Final Fantasy 15, I was like, okay, like sure, why not? In a Ubisoft game, why won't it cross? Why won't there be like a crossover saying that in ancient Egypt, like this character from Final Fantasy got locked away, and you sort of free them in the game, and they end up in the Final Fantasy universe? Like, sure, why not? But yeah, I think sometimes, especially if they're sort of doing like a, like it's based in the real world, you're dealing with like someone who's not in a superpowered world, or someone like genetically engineered, or they've got cybernetics and things like that. It's literally just you're playing as if it's a real world game. It's just like you said, like having that element of realism and not being like, actually we're gonna just make everything like completely inaccurate, I think is the best way to describe it. But yeah, no, it's been great, and we've come to the end of today's episode. And yeah, I just want to say a huge thanks to Andy coming on to the podcast today. It's been great speaking to you about gaming, learning, like I said, a bit more about you too, and learning about Streamcast as well. Essentially, if there's anyone out there who wants to know a bit more about Streamcast, maybe they want to get in touch, maybe they want to know about any upcoming events, or even know about your own podcast, what would you say is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I would say Streamcast _ on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. That's where you want to follow us. And we have a website, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, the streamcast.co.uk. That has a very good directory of it all, the stuff that we put out, whether it's YouTube videos. You can go on there and then subscribe. We have live streams. You can go to our Twitch and then follow us. We have a blog post. We have somewhere where we have events coming up as well. So our website is a very good place to keep up to date with us as well.
Perfect. And make sure that you check them out, especially the podcast, because as you guys know, we always love sharing new podcasts that you can listen to and check out. You heard it here first. You found a new podcast. If you're interested in the world of gaming, then definitely check it out. But yeah, if you like this video, a like, comment, and subscribe is always appreciated. If you want to make sure that you don't miss the next episode of Game On or any of our other podcasts, make sure that you click the notification bell at the bottom of the video. And finally, if you want to receive some perks, if you want to help support the podcast, because we can't do this without your amazing help and support, then please do check out our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. But yeah, that's a bye from us here. We've been gaming on for some time now, and we'll see you in the next episode when we speak to a new guest speaker and learn a bit more about the world of gaming. So that's a bye from us here, and have a great day.
See ya.